John, it's so great to connect today. You helped me with and I don't know if you remember this, but you helped me with my applications to PhD programs. What was that? Almost 2 decades ago, but more than a decade ago. And you've provided me guidance at other points in my career as an academic. So it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Nate. No, I do remember that, and it's good to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So I'm really excited to talk to you, not just because you look like Christian Bale, but because you've been teaching a class that has really had a profound impact on you and the students. And so I think it'd be fun to hear what this class is, how it came about, what you've learned from it, and what surprised you about that class. So maybe you could just start with describing this class and how it came about.
Yeah, thanks. So about 14 years ago, a friend of mine, fellow professor Mark Widmer, who is in the Department of Experience Design, and I'm in the Department of Management, we got together and we started saying, we ought to teach a class that draws on the very best principles of positive psychology and thriving and help our students who are getting all kinds of training on finance and operations and HR and marketing help these students also integrate principles of thriving into their lives. How do we help our students who are learning all about how to become successful business people also become successful in other aspects of their lives, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for people to be extremely successful in their business endeavors when the rest of their life is failing,
Yeah.
with relationships with family and friends, their health, their well-being. And so we decided to launch this thing as an elective to the Executive MBA students, and it was a hit.
It's sad how many people can do so well in business in so many aspects of their life or in specific aspects of their life and then just fall apart in other areas. And ultimately, I think we would all rather thrive, and maybe you can describe what that means, than, be a superstar in X and be failing everywhere else.
So the really the one of the reasons we started teaching this class is Mark and I each had listened to Clayton Christensen, the Harvard business professor, talk about these principles of how you will measure your life. And in this book, How Will You Measure Your Life, he describes these colleagues, these were members of his class, his graduating class at Harvard, who were really successful, incredible people who went on to do incredible things in the business world. But when they got together at like the 30-year reunion, and then later on, like the 40-year reunion, some of these people were not there. Some had died, some had gone to jail, other people had been divorced, other people had gotten into situations that they did not anticipate. And the whole premise of that book is that if you don't organize a strategy around how you're going to live your life and you just pursue whatever seems to be most interesting or relevant to you and to your personal success and wealth, that can take you to places that you may not have intended to go and that may not lead to the kind of happiness that you hope to have. And so, drawing on those principles, we ask the students, what kind of life do you want to have? And how do you organize your time, your energy, your material wealth in ways that support the kind of goals that you want to achieve? And if you don't have those goals, how can you organize your time and energy in your life so that you can come up with goals that will ultimately lead to happiness so that when you're on your deathbed, when you're in your 90s or 80s or whatever, that you're not looking back with lots of regrets about things that you could have or should have done, but didn't do because you simply didn't make a plan.
So I read this book years ago and I loved it. I think it's cool that you read the book. So I read it, loved it, tried to implement a few things. You read it, loved it, and built a whole class out of it. So that's cool to hear. And one of the things that I just absolutely loved from the book was talking about how we use our spare time. And it's so easy to get caught up in productivity. And, if I fire off this email or if I accomplish this task, I feel this feeling of satisfaction. And if we get so focused on productivity, we can sacrifice the things that don't provide immediate gratification, like going on a walk with a kid. There may not, maybe you don't feel the sense of accomplishment by doing that, or just taking time to eat dinner with the kids, or, go to a movie with your spouse, or whatever it may be, something that doesn't give you that same feeling of accomplishment. In the long run, it's of course necessary to maintain these good relationships, But if we fall prey to our desire to kind of produce and be effective and efficient, then we can sacrifice some of these long-term relationships. So that was one of the things that I took away from this book that I love so much. And so cool to hear the background of how you got to the point where you wanted to teach a class. So now maybe we could jump into some of the most valuable lessons that you try to teach the students and kind of how this course is structured.
Yeah, so we start out talking about the myths of happiness. We all want status and wealth and beauty and power, and we think those things are going to bring us happiness. And we talk about drawing on the principles of positive psychology and Martin Seligman, uh, the idea that these things are simply myths, and pursuing those things for the sake of power, beauty, wealth, status, other material things, and the motivations behind those things. That if we try to secure more and more stuff so that we can compare ourselves to others and look better, that our lives end up becoming pretty hollow and they feel pretty empty. And that having money, having wealth, having status, having power or beauty in and of themselves are not bad things, but the pursuit of those things leads to feelings of dissatisfaction and unhappiness. So we start out by having the students actually take a survey where they describe kind of where they are on certain aspects of these myths of happiness. We have them take some assessments to indicate kind of their happiness score, their values. And then we bring all that data together and we show it to the students. We say, okay, here are the averages, and here are some of the qualitative responses from your class. And people are surprised. They're really interested to see how these responses come out. And then we use that as a framework for helping the students understand that with each touch point that we have with them, which happen about every other month, that we'll be talking about some aspect of thriving. And thriving really is, it's the focus on helping people work on what they can do to be better in the elements of their life that matter most to them, defining those goals that are most important, and then being deliberate and intentional about creating a life that pursues those goals consistent with motivations that are intrinsic and intrinsically driven rather than extrinsically motivated or controlled. And so we get into things like technology, personal finance, health and well-being, technology. We talk about nature and being outside and the benefits of outdoor recreation and relationships, how to manage and nourish those relationships through very intentional acting rather than waiting to be acted upon. We talk about principles of what it means to sleep well, to have good health, to have nutrition. We get into into lots of details about what it means to live a happy, fulfilling life. And we don't try to tell people exactly what that looks like for them. We let them figure that out. We teach principles and then allow these people to define what those happiness indicators look like for them day to day in life.
One of the things that I think is especially interesting about psychology is this idea, term, uh, concept of miswanting. Our brains, our bodies, we want things. And because we want things, we think those things are good for us. Because oftentimes when we're hungry, we want food and we eat and we feel better. But we can fall into this trap of wanting things that don't make us happier, don't make us healthier, aren't good for us. So it's cool to hear that you're approaching this from kind of the angle of the myths of happiness, maybe these things we want that aren't good for us. This class structure you're talking about sounds unique because you're having touch points on like a monthly basis as opposed to, weekly or 2 or 3 times a week.
So what we're doing is these students are taking classes in operations or corporate finance or marketing or other topics that would normally be included in an MBA curriculum. We're coming together and we're saying, okay, what are you learning in the course X or Y that you're taking that is applicable to the principles that we're talking about in terms of building a successful life? How do you design a successful life drawing on principles of marketing or drawing on principles of operations? So what we're trying to do is create a thread that is consistent across the entire program that helps them not only learn new principles, that are relevant to their experience, drawing from positive psychology, but also connect it to the curriculum within the MBA program, as well as the principles that are part of a uniquely religious education at Brigham Young University, to help them tie those together and make those connections themselves, which we find actually happens in more effective ways doing them with more space between the classes.
Yeah.
So it's a 22-month class. We start
Wow.
with them at orientation and get together with them about every 6 weeks or so. Halfway through the program, we do what's called the Epic Learning Adventure. We take them down to Moab for 3 days, and we split them into 3 groups. They are group A, B, and C, and we randomly assign them to these groups so that fitness levels and experience with these activities are all randomly organized. And we take them hiking, and they do a set of canyoneering rappels. We take them mountain biking out on some slick rock and some single track. And then we also take them rafting out on the Colorado River. And in the morning, we do little mini modules where we teach them principles. Throughout the day, we have our staff members engaging them in thinking exercises. And then at night, we have alumni and other guests who come and speak to them after we have a nice meal and everybody's gotten a good shower and they're feeling good after a long day of being out on the trail or on the river or whatever they've been doing. And they're talking about the legends, the stories of the crashes that they've had or the fears that they've overcome as they've gone over the rappel, working their way down through the slot canyon. And we bring all this together so that at the end of these 3 days, they can look back and say, I actually now know what it feels like to experience flow, because I have never mountain biked before. And I got on a mountain bike and I was on this uneven terrain and I actually thought I was going to die. But I figured out that with good guidance and support and with training about how to work through a line and avoid obstacles, that I could actually become really good at this. And the challenge met my ability. And then my ability actually increased. So I wanted more challenge. And so I was able to go on more technical terrain. And they have these incredible growth experiences that fundamentally change the way they think about their ability to work in a physical environment. And then we ask them to take and transfer those learnings, those key experiences from Moab and apply them to what does it mean now to continue your journey into the second year of your program? How do those principles of thriving and flow and challenge and managing in difficult landscapes and working with a team to overcome obstacles, how can you apply those so that you can finish the second half of your MBA journey here at BYU? And it's a profound learning experience. I mean, for many of these people, they overcome significant fears like the fear of height or the fear of riding a bike or fear of water. And we gently, but with nudges, help them to work through those fears with the staff and the organization of this epic learning experience that we do for 3 days in Moab. And then ultimately that carries them through then the next 10 months of their curriculum, where we follow up with them and have touch points and refer back to the epic learning adventure. And ultimately, when they come to that graduation point, we then draw on all of those principles to come up with this a final cumulative experience. It's a capstone experience that we call the Plan to Thrive. So that's kind of how the course runs over the 22 months.
So I teach leadership in a classroom and it's sterile and I try to do as many real world activities as possible, but it's academic and it's still, I think, quite valuable. But, I think we're all jealous of this class that you're teaching. And I think we want to take your class so that we can learn and experience these lessons for real, not just in a classroom setting. So you talk about this Plan to Thrive. Is there anything about this class that you've been able to take away in your own life or something that like, wow, this class has taught me that I need to be better on X, or maybe something that surprised you about teaching this class that had relevance to your own personal life?
About 10 years ago, I was the director of the MBA program here at BYU. I was working long hours. I was extremely busy. I was working really diligently to get the publications that I would need to get promoted to full professor. I was extremely busy in my church, my ecclesiastical responsibilities as the leader of my local congregation. We have 5 young children. We had just moved into a new fixer-upper house that was built in 1974 and was full of problems. And I was stretched extremely thin, and I was struggling in my personal life. And I remember one day, my oldest daughter, came to me, and she was really serious and said to me, "Dad, I hate your job. I hate what you do. You're never around. You're supposed to be, have all kinds of flexibility. I thought that's why you went to become a professor. But it turns out none of that is happening for you in your life. And you are stressed all the time. And I wish you could just not be in the job that you're in, because then you could actually be with us more and be with our family." That was a wake-up call.
Wow.
Um, and I started thinking a lot about the principles that we were teaching in this class and how, ironically, I was not living those principles in my own personal life. I was not managing my health well. I was not sleeping well. I was not eating well. I was focused on a lot of extrinsically driven kinds of behaviors so that I could look successful rather than feel a lot of personal engagement and satisfaction because I was doing what I wanted to do for intrinsic reasons. And the other realization was that we were inviting these students to do a plan to thrive, to organize a set of principles that could guide their life after they leave the MBA program and take the principles that we taught and apply them consistently throughout the rest of their lives. I wasn't doing this myself. I was a total hypocrite. And my life was falling apart, even though, ostensibly, if you looked at me, all of the indicators would suggest I was, quote, successful, but I wasn't feeling successful. And those experiences with my daughter, and then the realization of that I was not living or doing a plan to thrive in my own life, really affected me. So we changed. I actually stepped down from the MBA program. I finished my 3-year term and I did not renew for another 3 years. I spent more intentional time with my family. And one of the changes that we made is my wife and I began doing a Plan to Thrive retreat, where she and I would go together and we would take the principles that we were teaching in the class, and we would, over a 3 or 4 day period, go somewhere cool and relaxing, and we would sit in some outdoor location with a laptop, and after having discussed, how things were going with our family and our kids and the principles that we were trying to live, and we would write down goals and plans and actions and metrics for success and obstacles to getting to those success outcomes. And it started something that was really profound for me and for Amy and for our family, that has now been a tradition that we've continued since that time. In fact, just 2 months ago, Amy and I went and did our Plan to Thrive retreat up here at Sundance, up the canyon, and had a wonderful 3 days, just being out and in nature and away from distractions and focused on how are we doing relative to the metrics that matter most in our lives. And it's really helped me stay centered and to focus on things that are most important. And I'm not doing it perfectly, but I'm definitely being more intentional about how I live my life.
So what an inspiring story. And we're up against the time, and I want to be sensitive to you and your time. But can you describe what the principles are that are most important? I mean, I guess you've touched on like sleep and take care of your body and, develop relationships. But if you're thinking like, how could somebody nail oh geez, I'm gonna have to edit this out, the Plan to Thrive. How could somebody just like nail the Plan to Thrive? Like what would a great Plan to Thrive look like?
Think about all aspects of your life. Think about your physical health, your spiritual health, your emotional health, your psychological and physical, all the elements that make up who you are as a person. and then look at the indicators about whether or not those things are progressing. Are they on a positive slope or are they on a downward slope? And you can come up with what those are. I mean, you don't have to take the class to figure those things out. Just define them. Well, yeah, my spiritual life is really suffering. I'm not doing really well in terms of connecting with a higher power. So what does it look like for me to improve that? What might I do to increase my spirituality? Does that mean affiliating myself with some religious organization? Does it mean spending more time in meditation? Does it mean going outside and just contemplating the world around me? Does it mean engaging more in service that will help me connect with my fellow human beings? It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to be personal. It has to be specific to the individual and to your life situation, and it has to be intentional. So the principle of thriving thrives on intentionality. Intentionality is the core principle that we try to preach in
Interesting.
this class and help people to understand. Don't let the waves just wash over you again and again, coming up for breaths when you can, and then waiting for the next one to hit you. Take control. Watch when the waves are coming in. Swim toward the waves. Navigate around the waves. Get on a board if you need to. Get into a place where you are in control and where you are intentional about living your life in a way that drives the kinds of successful outcomes that you hope for, the things that are going to lead to the true happiness that you desire.
What a great summary and recap. This word intentional, to me, just hearing you describe that, it really jumps out at how important it is to be thoughtful, intentional, rather than just letting things happen to us, to be thoughtful about what we're wanting rather than just letting culture or our biology drive, what wants we try to pursue. Well, John, this was so fun for me. I think, I mean, you've given us a lot to think about. Hopefully, yeah, I think all of us can probably do better. And so I look forward to not only sharing this, but listening to this again, trying to figure out my own plan to thrive, talking to my wife about this. I really appreciate you. Grateful for the time that you would share. I'm grateful you taught the class, that you did something with it, you saw something, you taught it, you applied it, and just really appreciate you sharing these wonderful lessons with me today.
Thanks, Nate. No, it's been a privilege to be on the podcast. I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion.